Jake Morrison stared at the spinning lights of the casino through the small window of his cargo ship. The space station, called Fortuna's Wheel, looked like a giant metal flower floating in the darkness between Earth and Mars. Bright colors flashed from every surface, calling to anyone with money to spend and luck to test. Jake did not feel lucky. His hand shook as he checked his debt records one more time. The numbers had not changed. He owed the Zephyrian Syndicate more money than most people saw in their entire lives. The cargo run to Titan had gone wrong in every possible way. Pirates had stolen half his goods. Engine trouble had delayed him for weeks, and now the buyers refused to pay for damaged supplies. The docking bay of Fortuna's Wheel was bigger than most Earth cities. Ships from dozens of different worlds sat in neat rows like sleeping metal beasts. Jake's old freight hauler looked tiny next to the sleek vessels owned by rich traders and gambling tourists. He powered down his engines and tried to think of a plan that did not end with him floating in space without a ship. His communication system beeped. Jake's heart jumped when he saw who was calling. Lisa's face appeared on the screen, her brown hair tied back the way she always wore it when working. She was calling from Luna Base 7, where she spent her days turning dead rock into places where humans could live and breathe. "Jake, I got your message," Lisa said. Her voice was calm, but Jake could see worry in her green eyes. "How bad is it, really?" Jake wanted to lie, to tell her everything would be fine, but Lisa was too smart for that. She had been with him through good times and bad. From their early days mining asteroids to building their life together, she deserved the truth. "Bad enough that we might lose everything," Jake said. "The Zephyrians don't forgive debts. If I can't pay them back, they'll take the ship. Then they'll come after anything else we own." Lisa was quiet for a moment. Jake could almost hear her thinking, the way her mind worked through problems like a computer solving equations. "There has to be another way," she said finally. "What about the Terran Banking Authority? Or the Colonial Trade Commission?" Jake shook his head. "The Zephyrians don't follow human laws out here. This is their territory, their rules." He looked out at the casino lights again. "There might be one option, but you're not going to like it." Before Lisa could answer, Jake's ship shuddered. Magnetic clamps locked onto his hull from the outside. He had not requested docking permission, but apparently permission was not required. A new voice came through the communication system, speaking in the clicking, whistling language of the Zephyrians. Jake's translation computer turned the alien words into human speech. "Jake Morrison of Earth, you will report to Level 7 immediately. The matter of your debt requires discussion." The connection ended before Jake could respond. He looked at Lisa's worried face on his screen. "I have to go," he said. "Whatever happens, remember that I love you." "Jake, don't do anything stupid," Lisa said quickly. "We can figure this out together." But the screen had already gone dark. Jake took a deep breath and headed for the airlock. The corridor outside his ship was filled with aliens from a dozen different worlds. Some looked almost human, while others were so strange that Jake's eyes had trouble understanding what he was seeing. They all had one thing in common: the bright, desperate look of people hoping to win big. Level 7 was at the heart of the station, where the most important games took place. Jake had heard stories about this place, but seeing it was different. The ceiling stretched up so high that it disappeared into shadows. Tables and gaming machines covered the floor like a metal forest. The air hummed with the sound of spinning wheels, clicking dice, and alien voices calling out bets in languages Jake did not recognize. At the center of it all sat Kethtar, the Zephyrian who owned Fortuna's Wheel, and half the illegal businesses between Earth and Jupiter. He was tall and thin, with gray skin that seemed to change color depending on the light. His forearms moved independently as he played 3 different games at once, never losing focus on any of them. Kethtar's large black eyes fixed on Jake as he approached. "The debt collector arrives," the alien said in perfect English. "I was beginning to think you had decided to run." "Running won't solve anything," Jake said, trying to sound braver than he felt. "You'd just find me eventually." "True," Kethtar agreed. "But it shows character that you came willingly. Sit." One of his 4 hands gestured to a chair across from him. "We have business to discuss." Jake sat down carefully. The chair was designed for humans, which probably meant this conversation had been planned for a while. That thought did not make him feel any better. "Your debt is considerable," Kethtar continued, his voice never changing tone. "More than your ship is worth. More than you could earn in several lifetimes of honest work. This creates a problem for both of us." "I'm listening," Jake said. I could simply take what you have and sell you to the mining companies, Kethtar said. But that would only recover a small portion of what you owe. Instead, I propose a more interesting solution. The alien's skin shifted to a darker shade of gray. Jake had learned enough about Zephyrian body language to know this meant Kethtar was excited about something. That was probably a bad sign. One game, Kethtar said. Winner takes all. If you win, your debt disappears completely. More than that, I will sign over ownership of Earth's moon to you personally. Jake almost laughed. The moon? You don't own the moon. According to galactic gaming law, I do, Kethtar replied. The previous owner lost it to me in a card game 50 years ago. Humans have been allowed to use it only because I found it convenient to let you build your little bases there. The room seemed to spin around Jake. The moon belonged to humanity. It was where they had first learned to live beyond Earth, where his wife was working right now to build humanity's future among the stars. And if I lose? Jake asked, though he was afraid to hear the answer. Kethtar's skin shifted again, this time to an almost black color. If you lose, your wife becomes my property, along with her considerable expertise in terraforming technology. Humans have such interesting skills in making dead worlds come alive. Jake's hands clenched into fists. Lisa has nothing to do with this debt. She has everything to do with it, Kethtar said calmly. She's what makes this wager worthwhile. Your ship, your freedom, even your life, these things have limited value. But a human terraforming engineer? That is a prize worth playing for. The casino lights blazed around them, reflecting off alien faces and strange machines. Jake realized that this was bigger than his personal debt. This was about humanity's place in the galaxy, about whether humans would be allowed to keep what they had built, or lose it all to alien games they barely understood. He looked into Kethtar's black eyes and saw centuries of cold calculation. This alien had probably played these games with dozens of species, slowly taking their worlds and their people piece by piece. But Jake also thought about Lisa, working on the moon to build something better for their people. He thought about all the humans who called the moon home now, and all the ones who would come after. Someone had to take a stand. What's the game? Jake asked. Kethtar led Jake to a private gaming room deeper in the station. The walls were made of some kind of metal that seemed to absorb sound, making everything feel muffled and strange. A circular table sat in the center, surrounded by chairs that looked like they could fit many different types of alien bodies. Stellar Hold'em, Kethtar announced as they entered. Are you familiar with the rules?
Jake nodded slowly.
He had played regular poker during his asteroid mining days, and he knew the basic idea of Hold'em. But stellar poker used quantum cards that existed in multiple states until someone looked at them. It was like playing regular poker while the cards kept changing in your hand. Good, Kethtar said. But you will not be playing alone. Galactic gaming law requires witnesses for wagers of this magnitude. Allow me to introduce your fellow players. 3 other beings were already seated at the table. The first looked like a giant praying mantis with silver skin and forearms that ended in delicate claws. Her large compound eyes reflected the room's lights like mirrors. This is Velcri of the Mantis Colony, Kethtar said, once the proud owner of 7 star systems. Now she works in my mining operations. Velcri clicked her mandibles together in what Jake hoped was a greeting rather than a threat. Her voice sounded like wind through metal tubes when she spoke. The human should know that Kethtar does not play fairly. The second alien looked like a walking pile of rocks with crystals growing from his shoulders. He moved slowly, and when he spoke, his voice rumbled like an earthquake. I am Gorth of the Stone Circles. My people built cities and asteroid belts for 1,000 years before this one took our mining rights. The third player was stranger still. She appeared to be made of flowing liquid that held the shape of a tall, thin humanoid. Colors swirled through her transparent body like oil on water. When she spoke, her voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. I am Ripple of the Deep Current, she said. My oceanic homeworld was lost to Kethtar in a game much like this one. I remain here as security for his continued good fortune. Jake felt his stomach drop. These weren't random casino guests. They were all former victims of Kethtar's games, now forced to help him win more. How is this legal? He asked. Galactic gaming law is very old, Kethtar explained as he took his seat. Older than your species' first attempt at spaceflight. The law says that major wagers must be witnessed by those who understand the true stakes involved. Who better than those who have lost similar games? A dealer appeared from somewhere Jake had not noticed. The dealer was a small gray creature with too many fingers and eyes that never seemed to blink. It began shuffling a deck of cards that seemed to shift and change even as Jake watched them. The quantum cards will show their true state only when observed directly, Kethtar explained. Until then, they exist in all possible states simultaneously. It makes the game much more interesting. Jake thought about Lisa working on the moon while this game decided her fate. He wished he could contact her, but Kethtar had insisted that all communication be blocked during the game. For fairness, the Zephyrian had claimed. The dealer began passing out cards. Jake picked up his first 2 cards and tried to look at them, but they seemed to shimmer and change every time he focused on them. It was like trying to grab smoke with his bare hands. The trick, Valkyrie whispered to him when Kethtar was not looking, is not to focus too hard. Let your mind see the possibilities rather than trying to force a specific result. Jake tried to follow her advice. Instead of staring directly at his cards, he let his vision blur slightly. Slowly, he began to sense what his hand might become. It was not great. Possibly a pair of 8s, maybe nothing at all. The first round of betting began. Kethtar played with the confidence of someone who had done this thousands of times before. His forearms moved independently, one handling his cards, another managing his betting chips, a third taking notes on a small computer, and the fourth tapping out complex rhythms on the table. Jake noticed something strange about those rhythms. They seemed to match the humming sound that came from deep within the station's machinery. Every few minutes the humming would change slightly, and Kethtar's tapping would change with it. More cards appeared on the table, the community cards that all players could use. Jake watched Kethtar's reaction carefully. The alien's skin color shifted subtly from gray to a slightly greenish tint. In the asteroid belt, Jake had learned to read people's faces during poker games. Aliens were different, but they still had tells if you knew what to look for. I will raise, Kethtar announced, pushing a significant pile of chips forward. Valkyrie folded immediately. Gorth studied his cards for a long moment. His rocky face impossible to read, then folded as well. Ripple's liquid form shifted colors before she also folded. Jake looked at his cards again. With the community cards on the table, he might have a straight if the quantum effects worked in his favor, but Kethtar seemed very confident, and Jake was already learning that confidence usually meant something in this game. He was about to fold when he noticed something. The humming from the station's machinery had changed again, and at the exact same moment his cards had seemed to shift slightly. It was so quick that he almost missed it, but Jake had spent years listening to engine sounds and power fluctuations. His ears were trained to notice when machines behaved strangely. Call, Jake said, matching Kethtar's bet. Kethtar's skin shifted to a darker green. Interesting choice, human. Let us see what the quantum field reveals. The dealer activated a device that looked like a small crystal pyramid. Light flowed from it across the table, and suddenly all the cards became solid and fixed. Jake's hand was better than he had expected. 3 8s. Not amazing, but not terrible either. Kethtar revealed his cards with a flourish. 4 kings. Jake had lost the first hand, but he had learned something important. The timing of the machinery sounds and the card changes was not a coincidence. Somehow, Kethtar was influencing the quantum effects. Meanwhile, far away on Luna Base 7, Lisa Morrison was having her own realization. She had been unable to contact Jake since his ship docked at Fortuna's wheel, which was unusual. Most casinos wanted to stay in contact with their customers' families. It helped ensure that debts would be paid. Lisa was not the type of person to sit and worry. She was an engineer, trained to solve problems by understanding how things worked. If Jake was in trouble, she needed to know exactly what kind of trouble it was. She began by researching Fortuna's wheel itself. What she found made her angry and scared at the same time. The station was owned by the Zephyrian Syndicate, which had a reputation for using legal loopholes to seize property from other species. Worse, she discovered that Kethtar claimed legal ownership of Earth's moon under something called Galactic Gaming Law. Lisa had never heard of such a law, but her research showed that it was real and very old. Apparently, humans had agreed to follow it when they first joined the galactic community, not understanding what they were agreeing to. She was still reading when her communication system lit up with an incoming signal. It was not from Jake, but from someone claiming to represent Fortuna's wheel. Mrs. Morrison, the voice said in heavily accented English. Your husband has entered into a significant wager. For the protection of all parties involved, we are required to monitor your activities during the gaming period. Lisa felt her blood go cold. What kind of wager? That information will be provided at the conclusion of play, the voice replied. Please be aware that any attempt to interfere with the gaming process will result in immediate forfeiture. The communication ended, leaving Lisa staring at a blank screen. She knew Jake well enough to know that he would never risk her safety, unless he had no other choice. That meant the debt situation was even worse than she had thought. Lisa began pulling up technical specifications for Fortuna's wheel. As a terraforming engineer, she understood complex systems and how they could be manipulated. If Jake was playing some kind of game that would determine their future, she was going to make sure he had every advantage she could give him. Back on Fortuna's wheel, the second hand was being dealt. Jake had been watching Kethtar carefully, trying to understand the pattern of sounds and card changes. He was beginning to suspect that the entire station was designed around manipulating quantum effects. You are learning, Valkyrie whispered to him during a break in the action. But learning may not be enough. Kethtar has had centuries to perfect his methods. How did you lose to him? Jake asked quietly. Valkyrie's mandibles clicked sadly. I believed that skill and honor would be enough. I did not understand that he makes his own luck. Gorth leaned forward, his crystal growths catching the light. The stone remembers everything it has seen, he rumbled. I have watched many games in this place. The house always wins because the house controls more than just the cards. Jake was beginning to understand. This was not just about playing poker well. This was about understanding the technology that made the game possible and finding a way to beat Kethtar at his own rigged system. He thought about Lisa again, and about all the humans living and working on the moon. They were counting on him, even if they did not know it yet. The next hand began, and Jake started listening even more carefully to the sounds of the station around him. Jake lost the third hand, then the fourth. Each time, Kethtar's cards were just slightly better than what anyone else had. It was not obvious cheating. The alien was too smart for that. But Jake's years of asteroid mining had taught him to recognize patterns, and the pattern here was clear. Kethtar won too often for it to be pure luck. During a break between hands, Jake excused himself to use the station's facilities. The bathroom was empty, which gave him a chance to think without Kethtar watching his every move. Jake splashed water on his face and looked at himself in the mirror. He looked tired and worried, which was exactly how he felt. But as he dried his hands, Jake remembered something from his mining days. The best asteroid miners were not the ones with the biggest ships or the most advanced equipment. They were the ones who could read the subtle signs that other people missed. Tiny changes in rock color that meant valuable minerals. Small shifts in gravity that warned of dangerous cave-ins. Humans had become good at space mining because they paid attention to details that other species ignored. Maybe the same skills could help him here. When Jake returned to the gaming room, he began watching everything more carefully. Not just Kethtar and the cards, but the whole room. He noticed that the lights dimmed slightly every few minutes. He saw that the temperature controls made tiny adjustments in a regular pattern. Most importantly, he realized that all these small changes happened just before the quantum field stabilized and the cards became fixed. Jake also began paying more attention to his fellow players. Valkyrie moved her head in tiny, precise motions that seemed to track something invisible. Gorth's crystal growths actually changed color very slightly throughout the game, and Ripple's liquid body showed tiny currents and flows that matched no pattern Jake could understand. During the next break, Jake made a decision that went against everything he had been taught about poker. Instead of keeping his observations to himself, he started talking to the other players. Valkyrie, he said quietly. What exactly are you looking at when you move your head like that? The mantis-like alien's compound eyes focused on him. I can see in more dimensions than most species, she said. The quantum fields around the cards create patterns in space that extend beyond normal three-dimensional reality. And those patterns tell you something about what the cards will become. Sometimes, Valkyrie admitted. But Kethtar has learned to create false patterns. High-dimensional sight helps me see them, but not always to understand them. Jake turned to Gorth. What about your crystals? I noticed they change color. The rock being's voice rumbled with what might have been amusement. Stone resonates with electromagnetic fields, he said. The quantum manipulation system generates specific frequencies. My crystals respond to them. But Kethtar uses many frequencies, some real, some false. I can detect them, but cannot always tell which are which. Ripple's fluid form shifted as she spoke. My species evolved in oceans with complex current systems, she said. I can feel the flow of energy through the station's power grid. But there are so many flows, so many currents. The pattern is too complex for me to read alone. Jake felt something click in his mind. Each of the alien players could sense part of what Kethtar was doing, but none of them could see the whole picture. They had been playing as individuals, each trying to use their own abilities to beat the system, but humans had learned something important. During their expansion into space, cooperation often worked better than competition. What if we work together? Jake suggested. Each of you can see something the others cannot. If we combined what we know, that would be cheating, Gorth pointed out. Is it cheating if Kethtar is manipulating the quantum fields? Jake asked. We would just be using our natural abilities to level the playing field. Valkyrie's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. The human makes a valid point. We are not changing the cards or the machine. We would simply be sharing information about what we observe. The stone agrees, Gorth rumbled. If one cheats, all may defend themselves. Ripple's colors shifted to brighter hues. The current carries many meanings. Perhaps together we can read the true flow. When they returned to the table, Jake felt more hopeful than he had since arriving at the station. But he still had one major problem. He had no way to contact Lisa. The communication blocking was complete, or so Kethtar claimed. Then Jake remembered something else from his mining days. He and Lisa had developed a system for staying in contact when standard communications failed. Mining operations often dealt with interference from magnetic fields and solar radiation. So they had learned to use the miners' backup signals, simple patterns transmitted through power systems and gravitational sensors. Jake began tapping his fingers on the table in a specific rhythm. It looked like nervous energy, but it was actually a code that Lisa would recognize if she was monitoring the right frequencies. The pattern meant emergency need technical information station power systems. On Luna Base 7, Lisa was indeed monitoring every frequency she could access. She had spent hours researching Fortuna's wheel and had discovered some disturbing information about its power systems. The station used quantum field generators that were far more powerful than necessary for normal operations. It was as if the entire station was designed around manipulating quantum effects. When she detected Jake's signal pattern, Lisa felt a surge of relief. Jake was alive and thinking clearly enough to use their old mining codes. She quickly analyzed what he was asking for and began scanning the station's power grid with every sensor she could access from Luna Base. What she found made her angry. Fortuna's wheel was drawing enormous amounts of power from the local space environment, far more than needed to run a casino. Most of that power was flowing to systems that had no obvious purpose, unless their purpose was to manipulate quantum fields over a wide area. Lisa began sending information back to Jake using the same coding system they had developed for asteroid mining. She transmitted data about power fluctuations, electromagnetic field patterns, and quantum resonance frequencies. To anyone watching, it would look like random environmental interference. Back in the gaming room, Jake felt his portable datapad vibrating with incoming signals. The device was designed to work in the harsh electromagnetic environment of asteroid belts, so it automatically filtered out most interference. But Jake had programmed it to recognize Lisa's signal patterns. While pretending to study his cards, Jake read the information Lisa was sending him. She had identified the exact frequencies that the station used to manipulate quantum fields. More importantly, she had figured out the timing patterns that controlled when the manipulation occurred. Jake began sharing this information with his alien allies. When Valkyrie next moved her head to track dimensional patterns, Jake whispered the frequencies that Lisa had identified. Valkyrie's eyes widened as she realized what she was really seeing. The false patterns are generated at 47.3 terahertz, she whispered back. The real quantum fields operate at 52.1 terahertz. Gorth's crystals began resonating more clearly as Jake passed along Lisa's electromagnetic data. The stone now understands, he rumbled quietly. 3 frequencies are false, designed to confuse. 2 frequencies are real. The timing follows a 17-second cycle. Ripple's fluid form brightened as she began to see the true patterns in the station's power flow. The current shows deception in the 3rd and 7th seconds of each cycle, she murmured. Truth flows in the 2nd, 9th, and 15th seconds. Jake felt like pieces of a puzzle were finally falling into place. With Lisa's technical analysis and his alien allies' unique sensory abilities, they were beginning to understand Kethtar's system, but understanding it and beating it were two different things. The Zephyrian seemed to sense that something had changed. His skin color shifted to a deeper green, and his four hands moved more quickly as he played. "You humans are interesting," he said to Jake. "Most species accept their limitations. You always seem to think you can overcome impossible odds." "Maybe that's because we don't believe in impossible," Jake replied, trying to keep his voice steady. Kethtar's laugh sounded like metal scraping against stone. "We shall see. The universe has rules, human. Physical laws, mathematical certainties, quantum mechanics. You cannot simply wish them away." "No," Jake agreed, "but we can learn to work with them instead of against them." As the next hand began, Jake felt the combined knowledge of 4 different species flowing through his mind. Valkyrie tracked the real dimensional patterns while ignoring the false ones. Gorth's crystals resonated only with the genuine electromagnetic frequencies. Ripple read the true currents in the station's power grid, and Lisa, working far away on the moon, continued to send him detailed analysis of every system she could monitor. For the first time since the game began, Jake felt like he had a real chance to win. But he also knew that Kethtar would not give up easily. The alien had been playing these games for centuries, and he had probably faced challenges before. The quantum cards shimmered in Jake's hands, but now he could sense their true potential instead of being confused by the false signals. The community cards appeared on the table, and Jake watched Kethtar's reactions carefully. The alien's skin remained green, but Jake noticed that his 4th hand had stopped. Winning one hand changed everything and nothing at the same time. Jake felt a small surge of hope, but Kethtar's expression remained calm. The alien had been playing these games for centuries. One lost hand would not shake his confidence. "Interesting," Kethtar said, his skin shifting to a neutral gray color. "It seems the human is learning our little game." Jake tried to keep his face blank, but inside his mind was racing. He had won because his allies had helped him read the true quantum patterns. But Kethtar was already adapting. Jake could see the alien's 4 hands moving in new patterns, and the sounds from the station's machinery were changing as well. The next few hands proved that Kethtar was not easily beaten. Even with help from Valkyrie, Gorth, and Ripple, Jake found himself losing more often than winning. The alien was adjusting his manipulation techniques, creating new false patterns faster than Jake's team could identify them. Worse, Jake could see that his alien allies were becoming tired. Valkyrie's compound eyes were dimming from the strain of tracking dimensional patterns. Gorth's crystals were beginning to show stress fractures from resonating with so many different frequencies. Ripple's fluid form was moving more slowly as she tried to read increasingly complex energy flows. As the hours passed, Jake's chip pile grew smaller, while Kethtar's grew larger. The alien seemed to be enjoying himself more and more as victory appeared certain. "Perhaps we should discuss terms of surrender," Kethtar suggested during a break. "Your wife is a valuable asset, but I am not unreasonable. I might allow you to visit her occasionally." Jake's hands clenched into fists under the table. "The game isn't over yet." "True," Kethtar agreed. "But the mathematical probability of your victory approaches 0. Unless, of course, you believe human luck is somehow superior to quantum mechanics." Jake did not answer, but his mind was working on a different kind of problem. He had been trying to beat Kethtar at the alien's own game, using the same quantum manipulation system that had been designed to favor the house. But what if there was another way? During his mining days, Jake had learned that sometimes the best solution to a complex problem was not to solve it, but to change the conditions that created the problem in the first place. When an asteroid's gravity field made normal mining impossible, smart miners found ways to alter the field itself. Jake began sending new signals to Lisa, using their old mining codes. Instead of asking for more information about the station's systems, he started asking about the station's vulnerabilities. Every complex system had weak points, places where a small change could cause larger effects. On Luna Base 7, Lisa was already thinking along the same lines. She had been monitoring Fortuna's wheel's power systems for hours, and she had noticed something important. The quantum field generators that Kethtar used to manipulate the cards required enormous amounts of perfectly stable power. Even tiny fluctuations could cause the system to reset and recalibrate. Lisa began studying the power grid that connected Luna Base to the Earth-Mars shipping lanes. Luna Base had its own fusion reactors, but it also used solar collectors and electromagnetic field generators for various terraforming projects. With the right timing and coordination, she might be able to create a power surge that would affect every system in the local area, but it would have to be perfectly timed. Too early, and Kethtar would have time to restart his systems. Too late, and the hand would already be decided. Lisa would have to trust Jake to signal her at exactly the right moment. Back in the gaming room, Jake was preparing for the biggest bluff of his life. He had been studying the quantum manipulation system all night, and he thought he understood how it worked. The key was that the system had to analyze every possible outcome before choosing which one to favor. If Jake could create a situation where the number of possible outcomes was too large for the system to process quickly, he might be able to overload it. But to do that, he would need to make a bet so large and so unexpected that Kethtar's system would struggle to calculate all the possibilities. The final hand began with Jake holding what looked like terrible cards, a 2 and a 7 of different suits. In normal poker, this would be one of the worst possible starting hands. But Jake had learned that quantum poker followed different rules. As the community cards were revealed, Jake watched his alien allies carefully. Valkyrie's head movements told him that the dimensional patterns were more complex than usual. Gorth's crystals were resonating with multiple frequencies simultaneously. Ripple's form showed currents flowing in all directions at once. The quantum field was already under stress from hours of manipulation. This was Jake's chance. When the betting reached him, Jake did something that made everyone at the table freeze. He pushed all his remaining chips forward, everything he had left. "All in," he said quietly. Kethtar's skin shifted through several colors before settling on a deep purple that Jake had not seen before. "That is a very large bet for such poor cards, human." "Maybe they're not as poor as they look," Jake replied. Valkyrie clicked her mandibles in what might have been surprise. Gorth's crystals chimed with a sound like distant thunder. Ripple's form suddenly became very still. Kethtar studied Jake for a long moment, his four hands moving in complex patterns as he calculated odds and possibilities. "You realize that if you lose this hand, you lose everything? Your debt, your freedom, your wife." "I understand the stakes," Jake said. What Kethtar did not realize was that Jake was counting on losing, at least losing in the way the quantum manipulation system expected. Jake's terrible cards could become a winning hand only under very specific quantum conditions. The system would have to work harder than ever to prevent that from happening. "Very well," Kethtar said finally. "I call your bet." The alien pushed forward chips worth more than Jake had ever seen in one place. The pot now contained enough value to buy entire star systems. As the final community card was revealed, Jake felt the station's machinery humming louder than ever. Kethtar's quantum manipulation system was working at maximum capacity, trying to ensure that Jake's cards remained terrible while making Kethtar's hand stronger. This was the moment Jake had been waiting for. He tapped out a final signal to Lisa. 3 short pulses, 2 long ones, then 3 short again. The old mining emergency code that meant execute plan now. Far away on Luna Base 7, Lisa saw Jake's signal and immediately activated every power system under her control. Solar collectors that normally moved slowly to track the sun suddenly snapped to new positions. Electromagnetic field generators that usually operated at steady levels began cycling through their full power ranges. Fusion reactors that typically maintained constant output started pulsing in complex patterns. The combined effect was a massive electromagnetic pulse that raced outward from Luna Base at the speed of light. It was not powerful enough to damage equipment, but it was more than enough to cause temporary disruptions in any delicate quantum systems. On Fortuna's wheel, every light flickered for exactly 3.7 seconds. The quantum field generators that Kethtar had been using to manipulate the cards suddenly found themselves trying to process input from a dozen different electromagnetic sources. The artificial patterns that had been controlling the game for hours were overwhelmed by natural quantum fluctuations. For those few crucial seconds, the cards existed in their true quantum states, influenced only by genuine probability rather than alien manipulation. Jake watched Kethtar's face as the alien realized what was happening. The Zephyrian skin cycled rapidly through colors Jake had never seen before, and all four of his hands moved frantically over the controls of devices hidden beneath the table. But it was too late. The quantum field stabilized before Kethtar could re-establish control, and the cards revealed their final states. Jake's 2 and 7 had combined with the community cards to form a straight flush, one of the highest possible hands in poker. Kethtar's cards, which should have been guaranteed winners, were only a simple pair. The room fell completely silent except for the distant humming of the station's machinery, returning to normal operation. Kethtar stared at the cards for a long time, his skin slowly fading to the palest gray Jake had ever seen. "Impossible," he whispered. "Improbable," Jake corrected. "But not impossible. That's the thing about quantum mechanics. There's always a chance, no matter how small." Velkri's mandibles clicked with what was definitely amusement now. Gorth's crystals chimed with sounds like celebration. Ripple's form brightened to colors that reminded Jake of a sunrise, but Jake was not celebrating yet. He had won the hand, but Kethtar still had to honor the bet, and Jake had learned enough about the Zephyrian to know that the alien did not like to lose. "The wager was clear," Jake said carefully. "If I won, my debt is cleared and I gain ownership of Earth's moon. If I lost, you would take my wife." Kethatar's 4 hands were very still now, and his pale skin was beginning to show darker spots. "The wager was clear," the alien agreed. "But galactic gaming law has provisions for unusual circumstances." Jake felt his heart sink. "What kind of provisions?" "When quantum manipulation is suspected, the gaming authority can order a review of the entire match," Kethtar said. "Such reviews typically take several standard years to complete. During that time, all assets remain frozen in their current state." Jake felt the weight of defeat settling on his shoulders even in the moment of victory. Kethtar's threat of legal review meant that the alien could hold Lisa prisoner for years, maybe decades, while bureaucrats argued about gaming law and quantum mechanics. But then Velkri spoke up, her voice carrying a strange note of excitement. "The Zephyrian speaks of gaming authority reviews," she said, "but he forgets an important detail." Kethtar's skin darkened slightly. "What detail?" "Galactic Gaming Law Section 47, Subsection 12, Velkri continued. "Reviews can only be ordered when manipulation is performed by the players or their agents. Manipulation by the house itself is considered standard casino operation, unless it violates the fundamental principle of fair quantum representation." Gorth's crystal growths began glowing brighter. "The stone remembers the law," he rumbled. "If a casino manipulates quantum fields to guarantee its own victory, it violates the ancient compact that allows gaming establishments to operate in neutral space." Ripple's liquid form swirled with new patterns. "The current of law flows both ways," she added. "If Kethtar's manipulation is proven, he faces penalties far worse than honoring a single wager." Jake saw understanding dawn in Kethtar's large black eyes. The alien had built his entire empire on manipulating games while staying just within the boundaries of galactic law. But if anyone could prove systematic quantum manipulation, everything he owned could be seized by the gaming authority. "You cannot prove manipulation," Kethtar said, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. "Actually, we can," Jake replied. He pulled out his datapad and showed the recordings he had been making throughout the game. "Every electromagnetic pulse, every power fluctuation, every quantum field adjustment. My wife has been monitoring your systems from Luna Base. We have detailed records of exactly how you manipulate the quantum fields." But Jake was not finished. "More than that, Velkri can testify about the dimensional patterns she observed. Gorth can provide crystal resonance data that proves you were using false frequencies. Ripple can describe the power flows that showed your manipulation systems in operation." Kethatar's skin began cycling through colors rapidly. "Even if this were true, no gaming authority would take the word of my employees against me." "They are not your employees anymore," Jake said quietly. "According to galactic gaming law, any being who provides testimony that leads to the conviction of illegal quantum manipulation is automatically freed from all debts and contracts with the guilty party." Jake had learned this by spending hours researching galactic law while the game progressed. It was an obscure provision designed to encourage whistleblowers, but it was real. Velkri clicked her mandibles with clear joy. 7 star systems, she whispered. "My people's 7-star systems could be returned to us." Gorth's entire body began resonating like a massive bell. "The stone circles of my ancestors. the asteroid cities. All could be reclaimed. Ripple's form brightened until she looked like liquid starlight. My oceanic homeworld, the deep currents that sing with the voices of my people. Kethtar realized that he was facing more than just the loss of one wager. If Jake brought Gaming Authority investigators to Fortuna's wheel, they would find evidence of systematic cheating going back decades. Every race that had lost worlds and colonies to Kethtar's rigged games would have grounds to reclaim their property. The alien's four hands moved frantically over hidden controls, but there was nothing his technology could do to solve this problem. This was about law and evidence, not quantum manipulation. What do you want? Kethtar asked finally. Simple, Jake replied. Honor the original wager. Clear my debt, transfer ownership of Earth's moon to me, and release my wife immediately. In exchange, we will keep our evidence of quantum manipulation private. And if I refuse? Jake smiled for the first time since arriving at Fortuna's wheel. Then we contact the Gaming Authority and request a full investigation of your operations. I think they will be very interested in what we have learned. Kethtar was silent for a long time. His skin faded to the palest gray Jake had ever seen, and all four of his hands lay motionless on the table. Finally, he spoke in a voice that sounded like wind through empty space. The wager is honored. The legal transfer took less than an hour. Kethtar's lawyers, who had obviously dealt with similar situations before, produced documents that officially transferred ownership of Earth's moon from the Zephyrian Syndicate to Jake, Morrison of Earth. The papers were witnessed by representatives of 3 different alien species and filed with the appropriate galactic authorities. When it was finished, Jake found himself legally owning the celestial body where his wife worked and where thousands of humans made their homes. It felt strange and wonderful and terrifying all at the same time. More importantly, the moment the papers were signed, the communication blackout ended. Jake's first call was to Lisa. Jake! Her voice came through clearly for the first time in hours. I've been going crazy wondering what happened after I sent that electromagnetic pulse. Did it work? It worked perfectly, Jake said, feeling tears in his eyes. You saved not just us, but probably dozens of other species that Kethtar had cheated over the years. He explained everything that had happened, from the quantum manipulation to the legal maneuvering that had finally forced Kethtar to honor the wager. Lisa listened in amazement as Jake described how her technical analysis had been the key to understanding the aliens' cheating system. So we actually own the moon now? Lisa asked when he finished. Technically, yes, Jake said. Though I think the first thing we should do is transfer ownership to the Earth Colonial Authority. Humans should own their own moon, not just one human. The journey back to Luna Base took Jake 2 days in his old cargo ship. When he arrived, Lisa was waiting for him at the docking bay with the biggest smile he had ever seen. They held each other for a long time without speaking, surrounded by the controlled environment that Lisa had helped create from dead lunar rock. Later, as they stood in the observation dome looking down at Earth, Lisa told Jake about the messages that had been flooding in from across human space. News of the wager and its outcome had spread quickly, and the reaction had been unlike anything either of them had expected. Apparently, what you did has given hope to a lot of species that thought they could never challenge the old galactic powers, Lisa said. Velcry's people are already filing claims to reclaim their star systems. Gorth's rock creatures are demanding the return of their asteroid cities. Even species we have never heard of are coming forward with evidence of Kethtar's cheating. Jake watched Earth turning slowly beneath them, blue and white and beautiful in the starlight. I never meant to start a revolution, he said. Maybe that's exactly why it worked, Lisa replied. You were not trying to prove that humans are superior to everyone else. You were just trying to solve a problem using whatever tools you had available. The Earth Colonial Authority accepted Jake's offer to transfer lunar ownership within a week. The ceremony was simple but meaningful, with representatives from every human colony in attendance. Jake signed the papers that made Earth's moon officially human territory, protected by human law and human determination. But the real impact of Jake's victory went far beyond legal documents. Within months, the Galactic Gaming Authority had launched investigations into dozens of casino operations suspected of quantum manipulation. Ancient laws that had been used to exploit younger species were being challenged in courts across the galaxy. Humans found themselves in an unexpected position. They were no longer just another primitive species trying to find their place among the stars. They had become known as the people who would not accept that some games could not be won, who would find ways to work together with anyone willing to cooperate, and who could turn their supposed weaknesses into unexpected strengths. 6 months after the game at Fortuna's Wheel, Jake and Lisa received a message from Valkyrie. The Mantis colony had successfully reclaimed 5 of their 7 star systems, and Valkyrie had been elected as the new leader of her people's government. She wanted to thank them and to propose a formal alliance between humans and her species. Similar messages came from Gorth's people, from Ripple's oceanic civilization, and from a dozen other species that had been inspired by Jake's example. Humans were building relationships across the galaxy, not through military conquest or economic dominance, but through simple cooperation and mutual respect. Jake often thought about that night at Fortuna's Wheel as he went about his daily work. He had returned to asteroid mining, but now he was part of a cooperative effort that included representatives from many different species. They shared knowledge, techniques, and resources in ways that made everyone more successful. The old cargo ship had been replaced with a newer vessel designed through collaboration between human engineers and alien scientists. It was faster, more efficient, and more reliable than anything Jake could have afforded on his own. But the most important change was simpler than any technology. When Jake looked up at the stars now, he did not see a vast empty darkness filled with alien powers that humans could never challenge. He saw a galaxy full of people who, despite their many differences, shared common hopes and dreams and problems. And somewhere in that galaxy, on a moon that belonged to